Okay, I think we'll kick off with the introductions and the rules of the webinar. I'm Joanna Oliver. I know a lot of you, some of you I don't, so good to e-meet you, which is the most hideous term that I didn't think I'd be using this year. I'm Director of Global Programmes for the Construction Equipment Association. I've worked with the CEA for over 25 years, delivering international events. And I'm up to 89 countries that I visited now. Obviously, at the moment, events have come to a halt overseas, but we're hoping by running these virtual events that we can still actually get you in touch with people that you need to know to keep you exporting, and also the experts that can help you through the minefield of Brexit. Just run through the rules of the CEA House. Most importantly, this webinar is held in accordance with our corporate compliance rules. That means no discussing any prices or products that might be in breach of the compliance rules when we get to the questions and answers. Anybody who does that will be summarily dismissed. The webinar is going to be recorded and made available with the slides on the CEA website and our YouTube channel. Please don't forget to stay on mute unless you're asking a question. And if you would like to ask a question, can you please put that in writing on the chat facility, which we'll be monitoring throughout the presentation. And then, depending on how the bandwidth is going, we'll either read that out or call on you to ask it. Please also, if you can turn off your video to help conserve bandwidth. I know because most of us are working from home, some people have a few issues with keeping the bandwidth going. Don't need to prepare for polling because we don't have any on this occasion. And please don't complain if we have any technical difficulties. We're really doing our best. And if we do have any, we probably can't do anything about it anyway. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, who is Mark Smith, the Mining Sector Manager in Infrastructure and Global Trade and Investment at the Department for International Trade. Mark's got a really difficult job at the moment because everything's changing so fast. What's a hot topic today is not necessarily one tomorrow. New issues are cropping up all the time, and as we're approaching the end of the transition period with frightening speed and no free trade agreement in place or any sign of one coming, Mark really wants to find out what we as business need as a priority. So once he's finished his presentation, it's going to be really important that you have some input, and you know, we can feed into Mark what it is that we need as a sector to try and help us through the minefield of Brexit. Mark's had a few issues logging on today. I don't think the government have paid the phone bill in Scotland, so he's joining from his mobile phone. So if we do lose him, we will be trying very hard to get him back. Hopefully we won't. I hope he's brought a very long piece of string with him for some of the questions, because the way policy changes so rapidly, he may need it. Anyway, I'm going to pass over to Mark, who I've worked with for a very long time, and I'm very pleased that he's agreed to be our speaker today. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Joanna. And can I just check first off that you can hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Right, it's all downhill from here then. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Joanna and the CEA for inviting me to speak today. Delighted to be able to join this webinar and give you a bit of an introduction on the DIT, Department for International Trade, what we do, some of the services for those of you that don't know, and then maybe pick up a few of the key issues, policy-related issues that we are trying to navigate through, shall we say, at the moment, appreciating the challenges that we're all facing. As Joanna said, I am based in Scotland, but I'm part of the DIT's headquarters organisation, which the vast majority of colleagues are based in London. I am the mining sector manager and have been for quite a number of years, and I have been with DIT and its predecessor organisations, UK Trade and Investment and Trade Partners UK, for those of you who've been around a few years might recall, but I've been with the organisation predecessors for quite a few years, doing various roles, including the Trade Show Access Programme way back when it was called something else. And then I've been involved as sector leads for various sectors, or at least involved in various parts of sectors, the energy sector, advanced engineering, and now mining. And I've also had a stint overseas in Houston. So that's me. So if we could have the next slide, please. I shall give you a bit of an overview on what we're hoping to discuss today, or at least present on today. And I would stress or reiterate Joanna's point that I would welcome your thoughts and feedback and questions. I will say right up front, I probably won't be able to answer them all. I may not be able to answer very many of them, but to use that phrase, I know a man or woman who can, or at least I can point you in the right direction. Some of these areas are very complex and technical. Some of the negotiations, where it relates to EU, etc., and free trade agreements are still ongoing, so are highly confidential. But if we can tease out any specifics in terms of challenges or issues, then I'm certainly more than happy to feed that back and try and get an answer or response for you. So that's the content that we hope to go through today. So if we can have the next slide, I shall just go into the DIT overview, and the next slide, please. Thank you. I should also say that towards the end of the presentation, I will be joined by my colleague, Michael Riley, providing he doesn't have the same IT issues that I had, who will give us a bit of detail and a case study on some work that we're doing in Peru. So for those of you who don't know, and I'll run through this quite quickly, DIT, Department of International Trade's role primarily is to support UK business do business internationally and attract inward investment to the UK. Since we became a department in our own right a few years ago, we have had far more of an input to policy, and that of course includes the free trade agreements come increasingly to the fore as we are leaving the EU. Previously, free trade agreements, as I'm sure you are aware, were the responsibility of the EU to negotiate. So attract inward investment to all parts of the UK, increase exports in every region, and that includes every region within the UK. The devolved administrations have their own trade promotion, trade development responsibility, but DIT does cover the entire UK. So if you're in one of the devolved administrations, you actually have two routes. One, the devolved structures and the devolved departments, but also you can access DIT services. Very much a champion of free trade. That's very much the government's position on most things, around making sure that free trade is facilitated, rules-based, and that barriers are removed that prevent that free and open trade. So that's very much how we approach every the whole sort of subject. And a couple of stats there in terms of a fairly large department, certainly with a global reach. We have international trade advisors in the UK region, in the English regions. Devolved administrations have their own arrangements. So we have a local presence. We have our headquarters teams, that's sector leads and other corporate functions and trade policy group, and our commercial teams in embassies and high commissions overseas. So quite an extensive reach. And we also work with other government departments around the international trade policy and strategy. Next slide, please. I just mentioned this because it was fairly recent development, a few years now, but we've had appointed trade commissioners across the globe in 9 regions across the globe, and they have responsibility to develop regional market-focused trade work around trade development, export, and investment where it's relevant, and very much have autonomy, if you like, to focus down on the specific opportunities in their regions. And all of their contact details are on our website at gov.uk. Next slide, please. I'm just going to touch on the export strategy. Next slide, please. The export strategy was due to be refreshed and published over the course of the summer. And as a result of COVID-19, it was delayed as they look to integrate COVID-19 responses to the export strategy actions and recommendations. Very much focused on supporting UK companies, UK exporters do business internationally and trying to extend the reach of the services that we have. So a digital approach, as many UK government services are moving to that platform. And also looking at where are the key opportunities as we see it in the coming sort of medium and longer term. Things like clean growth. I'll touch on industrial strategy in the next slide or two, but looking at what this clean growth and clean revolution might provide, the opportunities it might provide for UK companies, UK supply chain. Does have a focus on SMEs as well as some of the larger companies, but very much looking at the SMEs in terms of what services they could most benefit from government intervention. If you look to try and if you look to categorize the sort of focus of DIT, you have higher level political engagement around opening markets, market access barriers, and that sort of support for some of the larger companies, probably at that sort of political government to government level is where they would see most benefit. As you get down to smaller companies, SMEs and the like, more around the sharing of information and facilitating participation in business to business type engagement through the likes of the Trade Show Access Programme or mission activity. Next slide, please. Next slide again, please. The industrial strategy, we're very much aligned to the aims of the industrial strategy, which is around trying to look to the future of the UK economy, looking to boost productivity and promote the well-being of the nation overall, supported by business and through these growing and future sectors. There are various sector deals that have been developed with industry to take forward a number of those areas, one being construction, and one of my colleagues, Marcus Daly, leads on the construction sector and has been involved in that. And just to highlight again, of the grand challenges, the clean growth is primarily the one that we have been focusing on. Cross-cutting and offers significant opportunity for technology development and innovation, of which the UK is very strong globally. And the focus is across several areas of international trade, FDI, ODI, and areas such as R&D collaboration. Next slide, please. And next again slide, thank you. I've just summarised some of the examples. I won't go through them all individually, but some of the examples of DIT support. And these could be delivered either by DIT teams, through international trade advisors that I referred to, and there's a link there to find your local international trade advisor should you need to. You simply put in your business postcode and it will give you the contact details of the local international trade team. But some of the other sort of services and areas that DIT is active working with colleagues in the UK and abroad, but also through other agencies where some of the services are outsourced. Next slide, please. And to access those services and a broader portfolio of services, this is the website www.great.gov.uk, where you can subscribe to certain services such as export opportunities. You can filter the search criteria, you can set up alerts to be notified of export opportunities which are fed into the system by colleagues across the network, but particularly overseas. And detailed there a couple of other areas where you can look to potentially find buyers and suppliers indeed of products and services. So worth having a look on that website to identify where DIT may be able to support. And just at the bottom of that slide there, I've highlighted a couple of new tools that have been recently introduced, which provides up-to-date information on the latest on tariffs in light of EU exit, and some of the processes and procedures on exporting of goods. So good resource there to be aware of. Next slide, please. And I should mention here again, I won't go through this in a huge amount of detail, but UK Export Finance is the UK's export credit agency, and is available to support overseas buyers, but also, of course, UK exporters do business internationally, providing guarantees to banks and lenders that loans will be repaid. And the one key criteria for us is that any contract that they are involved in and they support must have a minimum of 20% UK content, which sounds quite low. Clearly, we try and maximise that, but it sounds quite low. But what it does do is it offers considerable flexibility in terms of UK suppliers' involvement in overseas procurement. And then there's a list of other products and services there that they offer. To get access to that service and to find out more, UK Export Finance have local export finance managers, and again, website with links to contact details should you be interested in finding out more. Next slide, please. I'll mention Trade Show Access Programme here because we work closely with what's termed Trade Challenge Partners, of which CEA are one. And Joanna has been a great advocate and user of the Trade Show Access Programme. It provides grant to participate in overseas events, overseas exhibitions. At the moment, it's not suspended, but based on the current situation, the programme isn't particularly active. But for SMEs accessing new markets, it's an opportunity to benefit from, admittedly, a modest government grant, but actually the value is more in working with in the Construction Equipment Association with accredited trade challenge partners who have the experience and expertise of doing business internationally and attending these events. So the real value for me is less on the grant amount, but more on the knowledge sharing with the trade challenge partner and also the other exhibitors and participants. Next slide, please. I'm not going to again go through these in too much detail, but just to let you know that I'm the mining sector manager, but within the team, mining sits within the infrastructure team, because the way we're looking at mining, particularly in a number of the, if you like, developing markets that we're looking to support UK mining companies invest and develop. The mine is essentially a large infrastructure project requiring road, rail, ports, energy, water, etc. So that's why we sit within the infrastructure team. But the infrastructure team includes rail, airports, water, construction, and services. And I've just summarised. I know this slide will be shared. Slide deck will be shared with everyone afterwards. But I've just summarised sort of 2 or 3 of the sort of headline messages or points that my colleagues wish me to make, but also their contact email address. So should you wish to learn more about the projects or the sector in general and what they're doing in that space, then the following few slides have contact details of the sector leads. So again, as I said, I won't go through it all, but you'll see some consistency on themes in particular around clean growth, so innovation technology to deliver cleaner growth, and things like digital solutions. Next slide, please. Again, airports, sustainable infrastructure is the theme across the infrastructure team. Clean growth and digital, again, you'll see, yeah, contact details of my colleague. Next slide, please. Again, water sector, a few projects are identified there, including the Peru G2G, which we'll hear a bit more about towards the end of this presentation. But again, if you have a product or service relevant to these sectors, then certainly reach out to colleagues and try to learn a bit more. Next slide, please. Again, construction. I mentioned Marcus Daly. Marcus Daly is the lead. I think Marcus is a former ITA, International Trade Advisor himself. And again, I think the themes are coming out, at least they're consistent with the sort of clean growth focus, the move to digital and new technology and new approaches. Third country collaboration, I'll pick up on, that's there as a theme. That is where we would seek to work with third country prime contractors, essentially Chinese, Turkish, Japanese, the sort of 3 main ones at the moment that we're looking to develop, but where we can partner with those prime contractors to deliver a project in a third country, and then through doing that partnering, secure UK supply chain engagement. And I mentioned earlier the construction sector had a sector deal. So DIT very much plugged into things like the Construction Leadership Council to ensure that the needs and the needs of the supply chain are identified and are integrated into the strategy, but also, of course, that the opportunity is then communicated to that supply chain. Next slide, please. And here's some further information from the construction sector on a number of projects in areas of work. Next slide, please. and one area close to my heart as mining lead. When you first mention mining, it's often, well, it does have a poor reputation, quite justifiably in many occasions. But actually, as we move towards a low carbon digital economy, we are going to need more of the technology metals. And so actually to deliver the clean growth agenda will require quite a bit of if not more mining for different commodities in different places. So that presents challenges, but also significant opportunities. And again, you'll see it's highlighted there, clean growth, very much the area that we're focused on. Industrial strategy alignment, industrial strategy, theme of clean growth, but also future mobility primarily focused around electric vehicles, so battery, supply chain, magnets for motors, so cobalt, nickel, lithium, and those sort of areas, and therefore feeds into security of supply concerns and issues which have been brought into greater focus as a result of the current pandemic. And just to mention, as on this, the current pandemic, mining sector's pretty resilient, and actually we've not seen any shortages, any significant shortages, as potentially mines have closed or at least shut down for a period. The demand for the raw materials has actually fallen as well at the same time. So we don't see any significant issue over the sort of short to medium term, beyond and notwithstanding the wider security of supply concerns. And I've mentioned the upcoming activities, particularly focus on one on that list, which is Expo Min, which was meant to take place in April this year, but was postponed until, well, we thought the autumn of this year, but it's been postponed again until April. And there is an outstanding question, which Joanna and I are trying to resolve, but it is around the TAP support for that event. So if you are interested, then make sure that you've let Joanna know, and hopefully over the coming weeks and months, if not sooner, we'll have a response in terms of the support to allow a UK group led by the CEA to participate in that event. And any of the other events, in fact, any of the other sectors that you're interested in, there's wider sort of activity lists that we can share, so we can plug you into them. Next slide, please. Okay, prickly question. Next slide, please. EU exit. What I should highlight is clearly we are getting towards the end of the transition period at the end of December. Yesterday marked 100 days. There is a website, as you can see there, which provides information on the sort of preparations and sort of things that businesses should be considering. I can't go into it in detail, partly because it's not my area of expertise, but it will be a different response to different businesses depending on what they do, and depending on where they do business, and depending on how prepared they are. But this website, this platform provides the opportunity to get a personalized list of actions to consider. Next slide, please. And then there's a whole raft of other considerations, and I won't attempt to second guess them all, and I certainly wouldn't attempt to try to explain it away to companies who are better placed than I to assess the impact. But there is information available, and there's a whole host of links there, which should provide some advice in terms of the sort of issues and sort of preparations that you might wish to consider. And right at the bottom of the slide, I've highlighted DIT Inquiry Service. So please use it if you do have any questions, and let me have any questions as well. We'll maybe have a chance for some Q&A towards the end. I won't be able to get into technical detail, one, because I won't really know the answer. It's led by our trade policy group, but also, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, the negotiations are ongoing. And so the situation is constantly changing, as Joanna mentioned right at the start. But absolutely, I'd like to use this this webinar to try and get some views, and particularly if there are specific issues that you're having difficulty with, or you're needing some additional advice on, then I'm happy to take them away and see if I can get you a response. Next slide, please. And then on the other side, free trade agreements, we are now able to start negotiations on our own free trade agreements. And we have started negotiations with a number of key markets, and in fact secured a free trade agreement with Japan as the first major trade deal. It was about 11th of September that was signed. I was involved in a conversation with the Australian team, our trade policy colleagues, and the Australian negotiating team at the beginning of this week around, as you can imagine, mining. So that was a good opportunity to input to some of these conversations and to explore some of the areas that we would like to see included on the wider infrastructure piece and wider construction opportunity and construction equipment opportunity. Then they will, obviously it depends whether it's raised by either side in terms of the conversation, but rest assured that the infrastructure team is pretty well plugged in to our trade policy colleagues who are involved in these conversations. So we hope to continue to do so and see some positive outcomes from those negotiations. And again, going back to the EU, a couple of additional points at the end there in terms of where we are. If you wanted to get a bit of an update on the latest round and the next round that will take place, there's a link there. And Bay's colleagues also asked me to highlight that they've raised a call for evidence for on the recognition of professional qualifications and regulation. And there's a consultation currently ongoing. So please, if you're interested, feel free to feed into that. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to touch on supply chain resilience. Here, we have been doing some work across government on assessing supply chain impact of the pandemic on supply chain and the supply chain's ability to respond, or at least to manage the impact and implications. This started around the whole PPE area, but very quickly expanded to look at wider supply chains. So it's ongoing. We're now in the next phase of that project work, but it started sort of late spring, early summer, and assessed a host of supply chains, non-food supply chains, medical and non-medical, but primarily around things that would impact directly people's lives or their ability to essentially live in some of the key infrastructure requirements around that. But the exercise itself has kicked off, it's been very useful in terms of kicking off a wider conversation across government around the response to COVID-19 and what, in addition to the crisis, what other opportunities might there be to look at how supply chains are positioned and what government might be able to do to support. So there's some links there in terms of the sort of support that's available, and it's a recovery strategy, but it's the recovery strategy is less around business recovery. It's more around things like sort of how we plan to deal with getting life back to normal. But the business support provides a link provides some information on some of the support mechanisms that are in place, which I'm sure many of you will have taken advantage of. And linked to that then becomes the sort of, okay, what can we actually do when we get to the post-COVID recovery? And there are a number of issues and a number of initiatives rather taking place at the moment. We're looking to work from an infrastructure perspective more closely with colleagues in the newly formed FCDO, that's the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which was formed after DFID and FCO joined at the beginning of the month. And it's looking at how can we better align the work that DFID had previously, FCO and DIT, in terms of supporting not just the development and response to COVID-19, but how can we look to support the UK supply chain and UK business get engaged in some of these significant infrastructure programs, which will be implemented going forward as part of the response, the economic response to COVID-19. So we're engaging in a number of those initiatives and looking to use where government has a prosperity fund to support the development of infrastructure projects, procurement plans, and basically capacity building and institutional strengthening of some of these markets, predominantly low and lower middle income countries. Next slide, please. And then probably looking more closer to home in terms of the supply chain, some of the bigger ticket items that we're looking to leverage to try and build and strengthen, if you like, resilience across the economy. Where can we leverage policies and market mechanisms, some of which I've mentioned already around free trade agreements and other trade levers? Are there any incentives that we can look to bring in, and that includes things like regulation or regulatory diplomacy, looking to introduce support the push for standards, and from our perspective, clearly standards that would benefit the UK and the UK's focus on innovation technology, for example. Improved international collaboration. There are a host of initiatives, particularly on things like that I know around the mining sector, around various World Bank, Responsible Mineral Development Initiative, Climate Smart Mining, those sort of areas where we could work together better with partners to leverage the UK's strong position in those sectors and in those areas. Supply chain resilience is from a domestic, and we're talking about being able to respond to primarily short-term crises, such as looking at things like stockpiling and any opportunity for that, improved logistics, and improved customs processes and procedures. And then it's listed here towards the end, but it's not necessarily the last. It's just the way it's listed here. Looking at how we can protect and strengthen that UK supply chain. How can we support the diversification of the manufacturing base? And how can we look to develop skills, promote innovation, R&D, and those sort of areas? And a lot of that was already ongoing. Things like the levelling up agenda, which essentially looks at how can UK regions benefit from the whole clean growth push in particular, or other government policy focus. It's a good example in, again, from a mining sector perspective, in Cornwall, where we've got quite a focus, and company Cornish Lithium that we've been supporting and working with received a grant from the Building Better Fund, which is essentially part of the government response to COVID-19. So there are examples like that focused at different areas, different regions within the UK, and looking to leverage some of the offer that the UK supply chain and UK regions have. Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Engine as two strong regions within the UK have quite significant initiatives in this space. As I said, these were ongoing before COVID-19, but how can we better utilise them as a response to the pandemic? Next slide, please. And I'll stop there. Hopefully my colleague Michael Riley has joined us. Michael is the programme lead on government-to-government work, and Michael will tell us a bit more on the government-to-government work, a particular case study, and also on infrastructure exports UK. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, magic. Okay, yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so as Mark said, my name is Michael Riley. I'm one of the, I'm a G2G program lead within the infrastructure sector team, and I cover government-to-government agreements and infrastructure exports UK. So today I'm going to talk to you about G2G and IUK, the two acronyms standing for government-to-government and infrastructure exports UK. Now IUK and G2G are two thematic focuses of the infrastructure team, and are essentially two new transactional approaches for supporting UK exports, and it spans the entire infrastructure sector, which Mark has just taken you through in excellent detail. I'll talk conceptually about G2G and IUK, and then I'll go into some detail about the latest G2G project we are currently engaged in Peru. Let's give the next slide, please. And again. So IUK is a government industry partnership offering a new approach to winning more business with a focus on the infrastructure export market. And it was launched in 2017 with the objective of taking a more active role to support British consortia to win the largest and most innovative contracts around the world. Now IUK takes the form of a private sector board, which meets 3 times a year to select projects which business then pursues with government support. The board itself is co-chaired by the Minister for Exports, Graham Stewart, and a senior member of the UK infrastructure industry. Now it's important to note that while being a partnership initiative between government and industry, IUK is very much led by UK industry, with government playing a convening and assisting role where it can. Next slide, please. Now, IUK offers 2 core services. So where an overseas client seeks a UK offer, we work directly with business to form consortia and co-deliver a work plan. And with UK business, we will, when invited, engage earlier with overseas client to help shape the infrastructure solutions which they require to support their own economic growth. Now, practically how that works, so the board meets, like I said, 3 to 4 times a year and decides which projects and markets to target. Once a project is identified and agreed by the board for pursuit, the companies interested in the project form an individual working group for the specific opportunity, where a project plan is then developed. Now, government's role is to offer the services and support of particularly the infrastructure sector team, and as well as our international network stationed at many of the embassies around the world. All of this is with the eventual goal of bidding and winning work as bidding for and winning work as a team UK consortium, as an opposed to individual UK companies bidding on their own and potentially losing competitiveness as a result. Now that's IUK. If we can go to the next slide, and again, G2G. So G2G stands for government to government and is defined as when HMG concludes, and HMG stands for Her Majesty's Government, when HMG concludes an agreement with another foreign government to provide access to UK experience and expertise that creates a commercial outcome for the UK, which is also likely to support soft power and influence objectives. Now, G2G itself is an emerging area of focus across Whitehall and within government, and there's a significant amount of appetite within industry as well as government to do more G2G agreements as a mechanism for supporting international trade and UK industry. And investing in G2G particularly presents an opportunity for the government to make a real difference with regards to UK export support, and has the potential in the future to be a great tool for commercial diplomacy by sort of cementing long-term profitable relationships and strengthening the UK's competitiveness abroad. So before this year, DIT is only engaged in one real G2G arrangement, and that was to deliver the 2019 Pan American Games, where we mobilised over 250 consultants for a period of 2 years, leading to what was described in country as the most successful Pan American Games in history. It's also worth noting that other government departments also do focus on G2G as a way of working, particularly the Ministry of Defence, where government-to-government negotiations are really at the core of how defence contracts are procured. But we're really focusing in DIT on trade objectives, particularly in the infrastructure sector when we talk about G2G. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the Reconstruction program in Peru, which is the most recent G2G agreement we've been engaged in at DIT. So following 6 months of what were quite intense negotiations, the UK was selected to be Peru's primary G2G partner on the Reconstruction program. And on the climate damage north of the country, where we beat strong international competition from France, the Netherlands, USA, and Canada. We very much see this as a major win for the UK as we move into the post-Brexit era, and it really underlines the UK infrastructure sector's global competitiveness as we emerge post-COVID. The Reconstruction programme itself, in terms of the detail, is a £6.2 billion programme to rebuild vital public infrastructure, which was devastated following the El Nino storms of 2017. And it covers the regions which you can see on the right-hand side there, with a really strong focus on the coastal areas up the left-hand side. The specific portion of that £6.2 billion that the UK was bidding for was to manage the first £1.6 billion of investment, and that's crucial to remember that we did not win £1.6 billion of work. We won a contract to manage the £1.6 billion of work, which is due to be spent over the next 2 to 3 years. And in really important context, Peru has a long history of struggle regarding the delivery of public infrastructure, and like much of Latin America, has been crippled by corruption in its attempts to level up its public infrastructure. And because of the success of the Lima 2019 Games G2G, Peru very much sees G2G agreements as the preferred method of delivery, with its proven track record of success. And G2Gs have the full backing of the current president, and the Peruvian government really value having another government partner alongside them as they try to deliver much of the public infrastructure, which has essentially been on the back burner for a number of years, as they've attempted to procure it through the more traditional methods, which really haven't worked. Next slide, please. So talking a bit more in detail about the actual scope of works, over the next 2 years, the UK delivery team, comprised of UK companies Mace, Arup, and Gleeds, will help the Peruvian government to deliver 74 schools, 50 medical facilities, 17 river basins, 5 river gullies, and 7 drainage systems. Now, they'll do this by providing specialised technical assistance, the project management PMO office, and procurement support to the government of Peru, with a strong focus on knowledge transfer from the UK side to the Peruvian government, as they try not just to level up their public infrastructure, but their capability within government as well, with a view to to them being able to run these projects and compete and procure them in the future without the need for a government partner. That is essentially the end goal here for the Peruvian government. Next slide, please. So where are we now? So the G2G itself has been won. There has been a commercial contract won for the 3 UK companies that I mentioned there, but there's still a lot of money to be spent. And in terms of export opportunities for UK companies, we're incredibly keen for the export value of this project not to just stop with the G2G. There is still a huge amount of work that's still to be won, and one of our priorities as DIT and government is to ensure the UK wins as much work as possible from the remaining £1.6 billion, which is due to be spent over the next 2 to 3 years. We're also incredibly conscious of the difficulties of working in a market such as Peru and Latin America in general. And we know that it's not realistic at all to expect UK companies to win a huge proportion of that £1.6 billion, given that a significant amount of that work will go to local contractors in country, as it will involve a lot of bricks and mortar and boots on the ground, building a lot of the infrastructure that I've just mentioned. What we can do, however, is as much as possible match up UK companies who are interested in working in Peru and Latin America with some of the key tier 1 and tier 2 companies who we know to be interested in competing in the upcoming procurements. And as you can see on the screen, the first round of those procurements will cover 9 hospitals, 36 schools, and a number of priority flood solutions. Next slide, please. Now, this last slide gives you an idea of where we, DIT, fit in the programme going forward. We're here to use our international network and knowledge to connect UK companies with key Peruvian companies who we know to be interested. We also have the advantage of advanced knowledge of supply affairs and roadshows, which are conducted and ran by the UK delivery team in their role in the G2G agreement. And I suppose the point that I'd like to finish on is that if you'd like more information on the Reconstruction programme itself, or would like to go a little bit further and formally register your interest in the project, please contact either myself or Mark or any of the contact details that you were given on the previous presentation, and we'll pass on your details to what has now been set up as a dedicated team to support UK companies on this programme, specifically going forward for the next, like I said, 2 to 3 years. And that's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions on with the limited time we've got left, and I'm sure Mark is as well, but I'm also available to contact, like I said, via email afterwards if you've got some more in-depth questions. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michael, and also Mark. We've filled a lot of our time, but we were 5 minutes late starting, so I think we'll just let the questions run for a little bit. In the interest of time, I'm going to read some questions out as they've come in. Early days yet, but the CEA has been engaging with overseas embassies and consulates to examine the prospect of virtual networking events with overseas market contacts while we have the current restrictions on travel. Does DIT have any specific policies on this, i.e. running virtual events?
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. Yeah, I saw that. I responded on the chat, but yes, but there are actually current examples of us doing just that, certainly in the mining sector, particularly with Kazakhstan and colleagues in that sort of Central Asia region, where they have essentially run a virtual mission, you could call it, where we have recruited a number of UK companies. They have engaged with relevant Kazakh mining companies and supply chain companies, and brought the two together on a virtual platform. MS Teams is the one that we use. But yes, it's been certainly successful in the introductions and understanding the opportunities. In terms of outcomes, a bit too early to say at the moment. But short answer, yes. Let us know if the markets of interest, the content, the themes, if there is, if you do have one, and we can facilitate the introduction and then facilitate the delivery of that virtual event.
Okay. Talking to members, and I know you said you wanted flagged up areas of concern, and people please jump in on the chat if you've got something to add. Looking at rules of origin, the massive burden of increased customs documentation, and that was, I think, a surprise to some people that was going to apply with or without a free trade agreement with Europe. And the UK global tariff and how that was going to affect our sector. Looks like we're better treated than automotive. And then the ongoing lack of information around the UK certification mark. I think if David Wayne is still on the call, perhaps you'd like to jump in with your specific question about steel and the exports of steel and how the rules of origin applied to that. Are you there, David?
Yes, I am still on the call. Hi, everybody. Yes, so for ourselves at British Steel, the major issue that we face at the moment is all indications are that British Steel will be, or shall I say the UK will be classified as a third country. Now, at the moment, the EU is operating a safeguarding measure against steel dumping, where a number of countries that have historically sold material into Europe have a named allocation. Now, at the moment, what the European government is saying to us is that the UK wouldn't get a named allocation, and we just have to sit under the ROW or third country allocation, which potentially means that nearly everything that we supply into Europe would attract a 25% tariff, which, you know, our customers wouldn't pay. So initial indications are that if we were to absorb that, you know, even in the first 6 months, you're talking about more than £50 million worth of tariffs that we potentially have to absorb just to maintain a footprint in Europe. The other side of the coin is that we'd need to do that as well, because if we drop production, then we would have our carbon credits reduced, which means then if the market returned, if we got a named allocation later on, then we'd end up having to just buy more carbon credits to satisfy the sales that we were generating. So really, it's one of those situations where we really need to put pressure on and understand what's going to happen as to whether we're going to be classed as a third country, and then also in terms of moving material over into Europe by truck. Obviously, we'd need to fill in import and export declarations. And one of the questions that we're getting hit with by customers at the moment is, okay, we're used to importing material. We do buy material and goods from all around the world, and we can handle import declarations. But one of the questions is, a truck from the UK can be into Germany the following day, but potentially by the time that we can send documentation through to a customer, like an invoice or things like that, how are they going to be able to lodge that with customs to clear goods? So where are all of the products going to sit until goods are cleared? Is it going to have to sit at the border, or do we have to do customs clearance ahead of dispatch? So it's all just getting to the point where we're 3 months away, and it could be absolute carnage. And I'm sure we're not the only sort of company that's facing those issues, although the 25% tariff is one that I'm hopeful that many others don't have to face.
So we've got absolute carnage. Mark or Michael, do you want to comment on that?
I can't comment on the specifics. What I can say is I know that the Bays business department have a team that are focused very much on the material sector, which includes steel, and they've got a team that are very much aware of they've been aware of various issues. Whether they're aware of this specific issue, I'd be surprised if they're not. But I suppose the question, David, have you had any engagement with that team in Bays?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got colleagues and also the CEO at British Steel's very much engaged with Bays about this whole topic. But it's just one that, you know, in previous talks or earlier discussions, it was always muted and banded around that there'd be no issue with us, you know, getting a named allocation.
Yeah.
But it looks as if that rug's been pulled underneath from us. So that's now starting to cause a whole other wave of issues, because it was something that we'd never sort of expected. One of the other things I'd just like to mention as well, Mark, if I can, because it ties into a lot of things that yourself and your colleague have mentioned. We were a lot of initiatives in terms of infrastructure building, the build program and such like, but disappointing, very disappointing to hear that one of the first HS2 projects was awarded to a French fabrication firm, which effectively means that all of the steel for that project, for that build, will come from mainland Europe rather than the UK. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but obviously it's really, really disappointing for the UK steel industry and UK fabricators that they've missed out on that opportunity to be producing some of the first big structures for the HS2 project.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. Yeah, again, that's I'm not close enough to the project to know the details.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And I don't know what the procurement process was in terms of transition and when the contract was, the request for proposal or whatever was first issued. Were we bound by EU procurement rules? I suspect the answer would be yes, and therefore with limited choice in terms of being able to make any other decision. But I'm only sort of second guessing. What I can do is, and our contact details are on the presentation, but our rail lead, Ria Bairstow, what I'll do is I'll ask her the question, and if you want to follow up with her directly, then by all means, but I'll do that anyway and ask her for a bit more detail, a bit more background on that one. On the wider sort of conversation around tariffs and quotas, etc. Again, I can feed that into. I can ask the question of our trade policy colleagues whether they can tell me or not. I don't know, but yeah, that's the sort of level of detail that they will be getting into if they haven't already, and I'm sure they have, with the EU in the current round of negotiations. So I can certainly get, if they're not aware, I'm sure they will be, but if they're not, I can certainly raise it. I can see if they can tell me anything by way of a line which I can happy to feed back to you. I suspect they won't be able to tell me very much beyond that. Yeah, yes, we're aware, yes, we're negotiating, and we will see how those negotiations go. But yeah, I'll certainly take that. I'll certainly take the points away, David, and happy to raise them with colleagues who are better placed than I and closer to the issue than I.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Well, I think I'm now chairing a power hour and 3 minutes. So just a reminder that the next power hour will be on the 21st of October, and it will focus on global market trends in well, it's not even going to be post-COVID, is it? Global markets in the time of COVID, and also a market update. And the speakers for that will be Chris Slight, Managing Director of Off-Highway Research, and our own Paul Lyons, who's our CEA Markets Analyst. So thanks everybody for coming. Thank you to Mark and Michael for their presentations. There's loads and loads of links to look at for more information. If you get stuck, please ask me on export matters, and Dale Campsell, who can be reached through the CEA website, who's our technical expert and can answer questions on Brexit related regulatory issues. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day.